Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition in the Export to Japan podcast series, brought to you by the team at Export to Japan in partnership with the British Embassy in Tokyo. This week, we are taking a dive into looking at what's going on in the world of security and defense in the Japanese market and discussing some of the issues between the UK and Japan and indeed where some of the opportunities may be and some of the great work that's going on to help facilitate those opportunities. And to help us do that, I've got a wonderful guest with us this morning, and I'd just like to take a moment to do an introduction and explain a little bit more. We have Gary Waterfall joining us. There's Gary, you can see. Good morning to you, Gary.
Hi, Steve. Really good to see you today.
Yeah, great to have you on board as part of this podcast. And Gary is Clarion's Senior Defense Advisor, responsible for strategic advice and guidance to the company's defense and security portfolio, which includes DSEI UK and DSEI Japan, which some of the detail we're going to drill into very shortly. Gary served for 34 years in the Royal Air Force, rising to the rank of Air Vice Marshal. He served as a Harrier pilot for the majority of his flying career, but also represented the UK and the RAF as a team member on the world-famous Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows. In higher commands, he commanded the UK air contribution to the 2011 UN-backed NATO-led operation over the skies of Libya, served as the UK Air Defence Commander and led the RAF's combat group. His last role before retirement in 2019 was at the Permanent Joint Headquarters, where he was responsible for the planning and execution of UK Joint Global Operations. On retirement, Gary started his own business, advising and mentoring predominantly defense-facing businesses, including startups, established SMEs, and major primes. So we couldn't have a better guest today to talk to and learn more about what's going on the bigger global climate, but also in Japan and the relationship between the UK and Japan. So thank you, Gary, so much for making that time to join us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Steve. Thanks also for those kind words. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, look, to get things going, I want to dive in during this discussion on some of the real detail about what's going on between the UK and Japan. But before we do that, let's maybe try and put that in context by looking at the bigger global picture. So could you just give us a little bit of an overview by way of an introduction about what's going on in the global landscape and what some of the kind of key factors are that are making the changes and the dynamics in the world in the sector that we're talking about?
Yeah, sure, Steve. We live in a real interesting, developing global situation right now, and times are changing. It's inescapable as to what's happening on NATO's eastern border in the country of Ukraine with the barbaric invasion from Russia last year, and it continues today on a scale in terms of loss of life and equipment that we have not seen before, probably since the end of the Second World War. The West has been used to, since the end of the Cold War, selected interventions predominantly in the Middle East, in an area where we've always had supremacy in the battlefield, and we've been able to surgically strike targets without any expectation of civilian casualties. Now, when we look across as to what's happening in Russia, and it's inescapable because of the news, you can see back to things that you used to see from the Second World War and movie footage and news reports of barbaric warfare, horrible, hideous loss of life from a military perspective, but also from a civilian loss of life. And that's really changed the balance, and it's changed the attitude to people views of defense and security. So with that as a context in Europe, I think now let's look over to the Far East. We've seen for many years the rise of North Korea. We know about North Korea in terms of its progress towards a nuclear technology and ability to have intercontinental ballistic missiles, and we see the routine testing. And we're also well aware of the growth in stature and nature in all arms of China. And then in the middle of this, in the region, Japan sits. Japan has had, by very nature, since the end of the Second World War, is Japanese self-defense forces, which are pretty much doing what it says on the side of the tin, looking inward to look in a defensive posture, not in an aggressive posture facing outwards. Japan has now come to the realization that we're living in a very dangerous and a very unstable world, concerned about the rise of China as a political and as a military power, concerned about the events in the region, and an understanding, as the Prime Minister in Japan went to record recently, that his assets he's got are simply not large enough to meet the scale, either qualitatively or quantitatively, and they need to go through a rapid upscaling of technology and production. And of course, for a country like Japan, they simply haven't got the capacity and in some areas, the technological wherewithal to keep pace with what's needed at this cutting edge. They've had a defense budget which has recently been doubled, and an understanding that they need to increase their level of forces to act as a more credible and sustainable deterrent. So they're looking at areas of sustainability from a workforce all the way through to the pointy edge of combat aircraft and marine and land vessels, but not only from that, but also to keep that going from a force generation and sustainable position from the arms and the resupply. So they're very much looking to the outside now, looking across the various cooperation and treaties from Australia, from UK, and of course from America, where they've been wedded for some considerable decades. And they need to do it, and they need to do it fast. When I was talking to one of the seniors in Japan just last week, actually, he said his biggest problem right now is getting around to spending the enormous budget that's now been allocated, a doubling of that defense budget with an industrial base that needs to work much harder to step up to that plate. So I think, Steve, what we can see is we're in this quite a volatile world now. And we see this in Ukraine. We see the effect we're feeling in UK across all domains, including cyber, and the contributions UK is making, NATO is making to the events that are unfolding in Ukraine. But likewise, is an unpredictable arena in the Asia Pacific. Taiwan is a great example, and Japan recognizing the need that they need to outreach as well as rely on internal domestic market to satisfy those emerging requirements from a defense perspective.
That's a fascinating introduction, certainly sets the context really well. And a few of the points I'm sort of really picking up through hearing your words there. First of all, obviously, from a commercial point of view, your ears start to prick up when you hear about what's going on with that defense budget being doubled out there. And also the really interesting point you make when you've recently speaking to one of your colleagues about the need to spend that budget and look at how to spend it. And we'll dive into some more detail on that shortly. But that is really fascinating. And then the third key point is the point you make about the fact that Japanese organizations, government organizations, commercial organizations are now outwardly looking from compared to a situation where it was very insular. So yeah, really, really interesting introduction. Okay, thank you for that. Bringing it down to a little bit more detail, there was some announcements and publicity and discussion recently around this new GCAP, I think it's called, the Global Combat Air Program. I think that's an agreement that's recently been signed, a trilateral agreement, I believe. But could you just tell us a little bit more about that agreement and the context of that, please?
Yeah, I was certainly, Stephen. It is fascinating. And as an ex-airman myself, looking to the future, it's really exciting. So the UK has been running a program for a while called the Future Combat Air System, FCAS. And that is really, don't think like if one aeroplane is actually a system of systems. From crewed and uncrewed assets that together will exploit and dominate the battle space. Centered around an aeroplane that was called Tempest, and it was unveiled a few years ago, literally 2 years ago, and there's been statics displays of it. And that technology, that thinking has been there. But all the while, underneath it, the UK has been strengthening its ties with Japan for all the reasons that I've laid out. And just before Christmas, it was announced that Italy, Japan, and the UK reached the agreement to launch the Global Combat Air Program. And what that's going to do is going to merge the national programs with the ambition to jointly develop this next-gen fighter, and it's going to be entering service in 2035. That's only just over a decade away. I know it's only 2023. These things move really quickly. And for this to be in service by 2035, that's a great pace that everyone's going to have to run to. Importantly, it's all about collaboration across the three advanced nations. So with the great technology that sits in Japan, I've been very fortunate to fly on the Kawasaki P3 anti-submarine warfare aircraft. Amazing bespoke technology for Japan. Using that and the way they've done their industry, harnessing that with where UK sit from a technology and a manufacturing perspective, and with Italy, bringing the best from all of those to make sure the sum of those three is going to be far greater than those individual components. It's really, really, really exciting times. And for sure, there's a long road ahead to get there, but actually having the three cornerstones is really going to help. I don't think individually a nation would have managed it, because the unit price cost of those assets is going to be so significant given the technology that's going into it. You're going to rely on a relatively large order book to bring that unit price cost down. So again, by having the three, just to start with the three, and who knows where it could go, I think it's a great advantage. Why do they need the aircraft? There's the Lightning, the Lockheed Martin F-35. Why not just have some of those, or the F-16? It's down to the rise in threat. And Japan is not an offensive nation. They haven't got the aggression to go out and reach and take a territory. What they need to have is a collective and credible deterrence. And the rise of technology in China means you have to keep pace with that. The United States are working through their next generation air defense platform, which, a bit like the F-22 they currently have, will almost certainly be US only and won't be exported. So if you want to take that technological leap into sixth generation further than where we are with the current Lockheed Martin F-35, we're going to have to go it alone. So doing it between the three countries is definitely the way forward.
Got it. Yeah, that's amazing. What a great initiative that sounds like. The other one that I was aware of that I just wanted to check in with you as well is I think this one's known as the Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, which was an agreement signed by both prime ministers of Japan and the UK during Kishida-san's visit to the UK recently. Again, is that another good example of all these initiatives, these sort of government-to-government initiatives that are opening up these opportunities for collaboration?
Yeah, it is. And I think GCAP sits within that, but it's broader than that. It's from the supply chain upwards through the SMEs into the large primes to look at this reciprocal access so that we can harness the very best out of Japanese technology and manufacturing. And Japan can harness the very best out of our industrial base, our manufacturing, our technology. And, we know the country is rife, quite rightly, with SMEs that are growing up. I often talk from a UK context. It's no longer the prime manufacturers that's got the key to the door that's going to get us that technical advantage. Often it's going to be a startup, thinking differently, thinking laterally, and without the harnesses and the handcuffs that sit in a prime organisation. And they will actually take that step forward. So now, with this reciprocal access program, it's the door's not ajar, the door's open, and there's now a methodology for UK to talk to Japan and Japan to talk to UK from an accessibility perspective.
Yeah, that's really good. And sort of taking that down another level then of looking at the detail of what can we do to do more to facilitate those collaborations and those discussions. I know you're heading over to Japan shortly, and I think that may be part of this DSEI initiative, the Defence and Security Trade Show. I know you're heavily involved in that. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that show that's going on and what you're doing and what's going on around that, please?
Yeah, of course I can, Steve. So it's being held in Tokyo, just outside Tokyo in March. DSEI has been run for many years in the United Kingdom at the Excel, a really successful and the world's leading, frankly, hybrid, cross-domain, multi-domain defence exhibition. The show's been run in Japan before. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to run it for the last couple of years. And we're really proud that we're going to be re-establishing and running DSEI in Japan in March this year. running under theme of rapid development, acquisition, and deployment. Speaking back to how I started, the need is here. We're at this crossroads where having the Japanese self-defense forces, now they need to revolutionize themselves into a better organization able to meet the threat and remain that credible deterrent. So that's the theme: rapid development, acquisition, deployment. Shows sold out. 230, just over 230 exhibitors. We only had 170 in 2019. And all of those exhibitors, 65% are international and 35% are domestic. So it's truly multinational as opposed to being an internal defence show, which is a real turnaround from where we were in 2019. We're expecting in excess of 50 international delegations. Again, putting that in context, there was only 20 in 2019. Probably about 12,000 visitors will be coming through the door with a range of speakers, both national speakers and international. We'll have the director of the Concepts and Doctrine Centre in UK and the commander of UK Space Command will be going across to speak out from a UK perspective. And it's just bringing out once more the fact that Japan is now international by nature and thinking versus domestic by nature and thinking. And it's a real opportunity for UK to engage with some of the big Japanese primes, the Kawasaki's of this world, and look from this subcomponent to component to bright idea and technology. And we know that the major distributors from Mitsubishi and Kawasaki will both be there using both of their ears as well as their one mouth to listen to what UK can bring to the party.
It's fabulous. That's absolutely amazing and so exciting to hear some of those growth numbers in the event and the show. And I guess that confirms the point you're making about the opportunity in the bigger landscape, all the things you touched on earlier, of talking about why the opportunity is so great right now. That's clearly backed up by the response you've had to this show. That sounds very, very exciting.
It is, and it's back to one of the quotes I had. The biggest problem is spending the money. Now, they're not just going to frivolously throw the money away, of course, but because of where the Japanese industry is, there's going to be a need to reach out to get good technology to bring forward and get that technology imported and working in Japan as soon as they can. So there's a great opportunity for UK. There is an enormous opportunity to go into a market sector that hitherto in defence and security has been difficult to penetrate for all the reasons we laid out at the start. Whereas now, through the reciprocal access program, it's going to be much, much easier.
That's great. And just on that point, I wanted to just sort of expand a little bit on something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Do you have a view that it's not just the big guys that should be looking at this? There is space for the sort of SME type companies, the companies that are innovating, maybe at an early stage, but have got some amazing innovation. That there should be space for them to come and play in this market with this opportunity as well.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And, without breaking any sort of Chatham House conventions, I was at a supper this week, actually, with Minister for Exports, Andrew Bowie. And one of the areas that he stressed and will continue to stress is the need for the SMEs, because we've got some very bright people in the United Kingdom doing an awful lot of great thinking of very complex conundrums. And it's these small, medium enterprises. MOD has realised it in UK. They wrote the MOD Action Plan in 2019, guaranteeing a percentage of contracts that would go to SMEs versus the primes. Not only have they achieved that, but they've exceeded that. And they haven't done that to look good on a voting sheet or anything like that. They've done that because they've opened the door and realised where the goodness is. So I do think it's a big opportunity for SMEs as well as large primes such as BAE, are obviously dominating this ground with the GCAP. But within the Tempest program, within GCAP, there's so many systems of systems here we need to look at, and it's where the SME is going to come to the party and actually have that key that's going to unlock the door to give the solution that hitherto with a prime they haven't been able to.
Got it. Yeah, that's really good. And I just wanted to pick up on the point you mentioned about the stage that the show is at. Totally understand March is not that far away now. You mentioned that the show has sold out in terms of exhibitor space and things. And you said there's an expectation, I think you said around 12,000 visitors. Are there
Yeah.
still, is there still opportunity for visitors and delegates to come? Those tickets are not fully sold out yet. Is there still space?
No, yes, there is. There is definitely space. From a floor space, from exhibiting, there is no space left. We are sold out, and we have delivered catastrophic success there, which is a great place to be. It
Yeah.
is a shame. We're already looking at future venues for subsequent years to allow more space, because this is going to grow. It's not going to diminish. In terms of getting people from UK, from Europe across to it, visitors, there are still tickets available, and through the DSEI Japan website, people can log on, and people then can secure their space, their visit for the show. I would definitely advise, particularly if it's not we're going to go from UK, I would go for multi-days. I wouldn't just go for a single day, just to absorb what's going on, absorb where the market is. And actually, from an SME or from a startup, just look at the opportunity and look at the contribution that you can make.
Yeah, very good. And I think that's a really good conclusion to the discussion, Gary. How exciting. I mean, it's been a great discussion with you, and thank you so much again for your time. I think we've really learnt, kicking off with that bigger picture of what's going on, some of the big global challenges that we're facing right now and the importance of those, and then drilling into why that has become so important for Japan and what Japan is doing about that, and how that in itself is creating opportunities for countries like the UK to partner and collaborate with Japan. And then so good to hear not only of all the great work that our government is doing and all the work that the team over at the embassy and the consulate are doing in Japan, with all these various agreements and partnering programs going on, but the great work you guys are doing at Clarion as well, leading a show like this and organizing a show, which clearly is a fantastic opportunity for all the reasons that you've just outlined. So a very exciting summary. So anyone listening in to this podcast or viewing this podcast, I hope that has been very, very useful. It's been great to catch Gary's time and hear his great wisdom on this topic. And we will put the various links to the website. As Gary just suggested, this could be an amazing time to go and visit Japan. Go and take a look at the show. Maybe talk to Clarion or talk to the contacts at the British Embassy to see if there's any other support with arranging any meetings or anything like that to get the most of your visit out there. But it really sounds like now is the time to go. So I hope this has been a good discussion to help facilitate that. So Gary, that just leaves me to thank you very much for your time today. I know you're a very busy man, so thank you for taking time out and sharing all those wisdoms with us. And when you go over to Japan in a couple of months' time, I hope you have a wonderful trip. I hope it's very productive, and I hope you get a little bit of time out to go and enjoy some of the amazing things that Japan's got to offer and experience out there. So,
Steve, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure here to join you today. So thank you very much for the kind invite. And I'm really looking forward to go to Japan. It's going to be a great experience, and the show is just going to be tremendous.
Super. Thank you. And again, anyone listening in, you can clearly pick up the knowledge and wisdom that Gary's got, a wealth of knowledge that he's picked up there, and he's getting more and more involved in the issues between the UK and Japan that we've just discussed. So feel free, if you have any questions, to reach out to Gary or send your questions in to us, and we'll be happy to forward them on to Gary in due course. So, Gary, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and enjoy Japan when you get there.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Steve. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye now.